Good morning. Ayin Beis, volume 3, page 1444. We finished the paragraph yesterday. And I did a pretty comprehensive summary in general, but also specifically about what we're addressing here, which is the role of the malachim, the angels that we invoke in our prayer in the Yetzer, Birchas Yetzer, that we say before Shema. So you have also a very powerful explanation of what that prayer is all about. Because since our goal is, the role of the Yetzer, the malachim, is two things. Our goal is to awaken love, V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha, and the Shema. Well, I should begin, Shema, to allow us to experience the unity of the divine to the highest levels, as we discussed earlier. Echad, liyachid, kutshabichu v'shchinte, hamayrich be'echad, to elaborate on the echad, and it brings to V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha, to love. So the invoking the prayer of the praise of the angels helps in two ways. One, it helps allow the animal soul to also experience it, because the animal soul and the guf, as we learned, is rooted in Noiga Vasiya, which receives from the Mekabel, the malachim of the three faces, Pnei Aryeh, Pnei Nesher, and Pnei Shoyer, as we discussed in the previous page, in the early part of this page. So by invoking those, that's why the Anshe Knesset Agdela said that by mentioning the Kedushas HaMalachim, how the Malachim are sanctifying God's name and praising God, that in turn creates Hazaza Pnimius, an internal shakeup of the animal soul, engraving it internally, which then allows, like Krishna, so once the animal soul is so-called been softened up or been acclimated, that by Krishna, then the divine soul can do its work of connecting, because before that, the animal soul blocks and impedes the way, like he said, menas, ma'keves u'menasas hanefesh halakis, from having that emotional connection to the divine, as we see in our lives. And the second function of Yetzer, the second thing, is that also the divine souls reaching Ahava is helped through the malachim, because the malachim channel, like we learned about there, they have the guts, that the Bnei Mayim, the Meyai, that he called Homo Me'alai, that channel Ahava and Yira also into the divine soul, as we learned earlier on page 1425 and on. Specifically also on page 1434. Okay. And that's what we concluded yesterday. So now I'm ready to continue the new paragraph on page 1444. And the text, if you want to follow along the text, can be found at ayinbeis.com. I also posted on the group, I mentioned yesterday the Eira Teira from the Tzemach Tzedek, which elaborates more about the Nefesh Abamis is being rooted and receiving from the Malachim, the Markava of Asiya. There is more elaborate, and that's some of the basis of what I explained yesterday. If you want to see it inside, you could see the pages there in Hebrew. It's quite a fascinating piece. So let's continue now, new paragraph on page 1444. So now the Rebbe Rashab is going to qualify. Because remember, we're dealing with two sides of the neshama. The neshama, as it's rooted above, in its original root, is higher than angels. That was why he asked the question, why do you need Yetzer of the angels when the neshama is rooted a lot higher and connects straight with the core essence of the divine? On the other hand, the neshama, as it comes down below, is dealing with and manifesting inside of a body and an animal soul, and therefore needs the siyua, the support of these angels, both in dealing with the animal soul and also channeling the love and reverence of the divine into the divine soul. So this is a constant back and forth that we have been learning and will be learning. And now the Rebbe Rashab is going to add more to this. So he says, V'hine, and now, this is that the souls receive their love and reverence through the malachim, receive not originates from there. Remember, the malachim are channelers, they're distributors, they're delivery. Just like the digestive system delivers, does not create. When you consume food, that doesn't come from the malach. I mean, the food itself also comes through the mazolas and so on, but we're talking about the process. But once the food is eaten and swallowed, then the digestive system comes into play to break it down, expel the waste, absorb the nutrients, and distribute it properly to each part of the body, as we learned earlier. So the malachim are the delivery, like the mailmen, so to speak, the delivery agents. So as he's saying, this that the neshamas receive through the malachim, their Ahava and Yira, zeu bizman ha-Golus. This is a new qualification that he has not talked about till now. This is in the time of Golus, time of exile. Shemekabel neshamas ha'idei mutzayim, where the neshamas receive through intermediaries, not directly, which of course is implying, and he's going to discuss, that not in time of Golus, even in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, and definitely when Mashiach comes, we will be able to get it directly from the source without these intermediaries. But now he's going to explain. So he's qualifying even further that in addition to the fact that to draw down these divine infinite energies into existence, you need the so-called the cosmic digestive system of the angels, as well as to affect the animal soul, as we learned. He's adding another point, and the neshamas themselves are rooted higher, that their role is in Zman HaGolus. Dihine ksiv, and he's going to explain and prove it now, make the case for it. Because it says, Hine anechi shelach malach, in Parshas Mishpatim. He says, here, God says, I will send malach, an angel. Upirish Rashi, and Rashi there in the commentary says, Shezeh matat, that's referring to the angel matat, sheshmoi kishem rabbi. The name of this angel is like the name of his master. The angel is named on the name of Hashem. That's matat. It's one of the names that we understand. It's deeper meaning. It's the name of God. V'cheinu beGemara Sanhedrin, Daf Lamed Ches Seif Ayin Beis. Basically saying the source of this and the place where this is said is also in Sanhedrin 38b. So what is Hashem saying? I'm sending an angel. I'm not coming myself. I'm doing it through an angel. The angel, however, is not an independent entity. An angel in general is a messenger of the divine, but especially Matat is Shmoi Kishem Rabbi. And the Rebbe Rashab is now going to explain Matat. Now you may recall Matat earlier. That was the angel that he referred to when he spoke about how Malchus in Atzilus, when it draws down into Biy'a, when it travels into Biy'a, it's called Matat. I'll refer you to the page where that was there. That we learned that earlier. When he spoke about the two levels of Malchus. So here we are. On page, I believe this was on page, it started on page 1429. Yeah, that's where the discussion. I'm looking for the actual expression of Matat. Okay, I'll find it soon, but we don't have to wait for it because I'm just referring that we've already mentioned this name, not at length, but now clearly he's going back to it. So it's very consistent to what we learned earlier. Okay. I think it was on the top of a page where he said there's two levels in Malchus. Oh, here we are. Yeah. Page 1428 and 1429. When he spoke about Ma'aseh Tachtenim, Yeah, if you look at the beginning of the paragraph, the new paragraph on page 1429, he says, and that's from the previous page where he says it explicitly. So it's Malchus as it manifests in Matat. And Matat is the name of the Malach, one of the higher Malachim. Okay. He says like this, V'yadua, continuing on here, the Matat Nikra Nar. We actually learned this earlier a while back. I'd have to look up where. I don't remember where now. Matat is called Nar. Nar means like a young one, like a young person. Nar is like a child. Zokan and Nar. Yeah, we learned that clearly, for sure. Maybe Yitzchak, you could do a little search in volume 3. Zokan and Nar he spoke about.
Okay.
We're looking for the word Zokan and Nar. Yeah, I remember more or less where it was. I think it's helpful to just see the reference. But regardless, he's called Nar. So Nar, even though we're not talking about human beings, Nar usually refers to a younger level, less mature level. So when he says Kinar Anoichi, or when he calls someone a Nar, you're talking about a younger level. Zokin refers to a sage. So it refers to like Atik. And Nar usually refers to Zah. Let's see how he explains it here. That's why I wanted to refer to it, because I think he spoke about it there back where I don't even remember now. Okay.
The bottom of page 1368.
Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Hefresh bein anar v'lezoken. Anar from Pishes be'chachma, correct. Good. There you go. Oh, it actually starts at the top of the paragraph, where Mishnah, now I remember, Mishnah Issa said, Ahu nar. Shifcha d'shchinta. Issa means, yeah, Mishnah is like the spouse of that nar. And that's what he explains when nar is zokin is atik and nar is, I believe, zah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think he mentions matat there, if I recall correctly. But nar, and also the bottom of the next page. Now you see. Actually, I think he does mention maybe. Let's see. Yeah, matat. The bottom of page 1369, he mentions that nar is matat, eitz hadas. Okay, very nice. Okay, good for reference purposes. So he says like this. So now you do a matat nikla nar. Ukamasha kosav nar hayisi gamza kanti. I was young, gamza kanti, and I also now aged. Sare shel elim omre. Who says this? Nar hayisi. I was a nar. That's the sare shel elim. Sare shel elim means the minister of the world, which is referring to matat, the malach matat. So that's the level of matat, nar. We'll see where he's going with this. Let's continue. V'yesh b'matat, beis madreges. In matat, there are 2 levels. U'kamosh mitzinu b'Yeshua. Shenikra nar, like we find by Yeshua, Joshua, the disciple and the successor of Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Torah calls him nar. Shenemar v'Yeshua ben Nun nar. He was the young one that sat at the Lo Yomish Meteichael. He never left from the tent of Moshe. He was completely dedicated. He was the nar of Moshe. And we know that by Yeshua there are 2 levels. V'yesh v'hoya boy in Yeshua were 2 levels. Beis madregas. Echad kishahoya Mekabel Moshe. One is when Yeshua was receiving from Moshe, Shenikra Nar. I'm sorry, Tiksiv Boy, La Yomish Metecha Eil, like I just mentioned. La Yomish means Metecha Eil, he never parted, he never left from the oil, the tent of Moshe. Why? Because he was a completely dedicated and devoted student of Moshe. At that stage, he wasn't at all a Mashpia. He was completely a Mekabel. Meaning he wasn't yet in a state of being an independent entity. That means it's not just a physical thing that he hung around there, Moshe. It means his whole life was completely dedicated, like a chassid, completely dedicated, a student to his teacher. He was united with, connected with, attached with Moshe's teacher. That's one level in Yeshua. From this, we're going to derive that matat, which is also called nar, like Yeshua, also has two levels. What's the second level in Yeshua? Habeis achrei Moshe. After the passing of Moshe, afal pisha samach yoda alav. Even though Moshe did ordain him by placing his hands, samach yodav, he placed his hands on him, which means like samach also from the word support. He transferred essentially power of attorney, if you wish, but more than that, obviously. Gave him smicha. He ordained him with the power that Moshe himself had. So even though he was samach, but nevertheless, but after Moshe's passing, he now had to become a leader on his own. Yes, with the power of Moshe and Moshe's smicha and Moshe's ordination, but now he becomes a davar b'fnei. So the years he was a student of Moshe, there he was not a mashpia at all, just Mekabel. And then comes stage 2 in his life, the second element in the nar, in Yeshua, that where he becomes a mashpia and davar b'fnei atzmei with the power and ordination of Moshe. V'agam, and even though the lechera, seemingly, hamadrega habeis, this second level, he ilui b'Yeshua, is a quality, is a virtue, is a superior quality in Yeshua. Sheyamanig es Yisrael, v'hoya mashpia lehem, that he led, he was a manig, he was a leader, a guide of Yisrael, of the Jewish people, and was mashpia to them and transmitted to them. Ach be'emes hamadrega aleph yeser gevei b'madrega beis. So even though you would think the level 2 in Yeshua is a greater level, because now he's a mashpia, he's a manig, and a mashpia. Nevertheless, in truth, the first level is higher than the second level. And he's going to explain why. And then he's going to come back to matat, and matat is coming to explain the malach that serves as an intermediary for a lakus, for the divine zman Golus, to draw into neshamas Yisrael. So this is the flow. But right now, before we get back to the central, the point of departure, he's going to elaborate, as the Rebbe Rashab does, why is this first level higher than the second level when the seemingly intuitively seems the other way around? Yes, the first level prepared him for the second level. For the second level, he becomes a Rebbe himself. He teach Yeshua, the manig, the mashpia. So he's going to explain now. But before I continue, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but in case anybody has any questions, please. Okay. So let's continue. The Yuvan Zeh, I will understand this, meaning the quality of number 1 over 2 in the nar of Yeshua. We'll understand this Mamasha Matzinu, the Dugma Kazu, from what we find similar to this, Lamaila B'Bchinas Malchus, meaning Lamaila in the higher worlds, in the level of Malchus. Malchus Atzilus, B'Bchinas Malchus Atzilus. She B'Bchinas Mekabel, B'Bchinas Mashpia. We've learned this, that Malchus too has these two things, is bechinas Mekabel. It's a recipient, and it's also bechinas Mashpia. It's also a Mashpia to the lower levels. We learned this, we learned it earlier pretty elaborately, and even earlier in the previous VAMs. This is a theme that has been mentioned in Ayin Beis quite a few times. I'd have to find them all, but for now, just we did talk about this. We'll connect it. I'll try to find where it was, and I think it all helps understand the whole flow when you see the connections. So what does it say? The Zeu Sha'amar. This is what we say. V'amuna kol zeis v'kaim aleinu. So this for sure was brought earlier. Yeah, this I remember very specifically. I think it may be even in the same area with the Nar and the Zokim. Maybe not. Close to that area, I recall this. So anyway, here's an expression we say in davening. Amuna kol zeis v'kaim aleinu. So if you read it closely, the verse, is it masculine or feminine? Amuna kol zeis is feminine. V'kayim aleinu is masculine. It doesn't say v'kayemas aleinu or aleinu. Loshen tchar v'nukva. So how is it possible that, which one is it? Feminine or masculine? Loshen tchar masculine and nukva feminine. V'hainu.
The bottom of page 1350.
1350? Okay. Good. Yeah. There you go. Yeah, gam bechin, yeah, Muna kol zeis loshen nukva, v'kaim aleinu loshen tchar. Right. All right. It was right in the beginning of the topic of Torah Air. Yeah. Now we're up. Yes, this is connected, but I'll get to the connection later. Because there he talks about the neshama as it comes down into the body, the psila, the wick. Yeah. This is all going to tie together. I'll explain later when the whole Ayin Beis is going to come back to page 1350. Actually, this that you just pointed these pages. So I see already how he's connecting it. Okay. Let's get back. Let's go back here. Fine. Because Malchus has two things. Compared to Atzilus is the 10th sphere, the last that receives. Compared to the levels of Atzilus, Malchus is a Mekabel. Ukiyadua, the Bechinas Malchus is safer the Kol Dargin, the Atzilus. The Malchus is the end of all the levels of Atzilus, the last of the 10 spheres. Mekabelis Mates Spheres, the Atzilus. And it receives from the 9 higher spheres, from Chachma through Yesod. That's the Mekabel part of Malchus. But there's another side to Malchus. That says Malchus is the recipient, like the student, receiving from Atzilus. V'hi b'chinas Mashpia. Number 2 is Malchus is Mashpia. Le'elim is Biy'a. Mashpia is the conduit that channels and transmits to the worlds of Biy'a, because Malchus is higher than Biy'a. Malchus becomes the Keser of Biy'a. So basically, you have both things in Malchus. From this, we're going to understand regarding Yeshua. So what do we see from this? Which is higher? Mekabel or Mashpia? So we see Hare, B'chinas Mekabel Shaba. So from this we derive that the Mekabel within Malchus, the recipient dimension of Malchus, L'mayla B'chinas Mashpia Shaba, is higher than Malchus as the Mashpia and the transmitter. So even though, like he said before, initially you think that Yeshua, when he becomes a leader, he's greater. The truth is the Mekabel is Mekabel from higher levels. So that's why it's higher. I am Ashakosa Bedrush Kriyas Yamsuf. He's sending us to look in the Drush Kriyas Yamsuf, which I'm not sure what Maimer he's referring to. I mean, usually Drush Kriyas Yamsuf refers to either the Alter Rebbe or the Mittler Rebbe. Sometimes it's Tzemach Tzedek. So I have to find which Maimer he's talking to. I'll look it up later. Okay. Vizehu. Any questions? It's obviously middle of the subject, but again, it seems pretty straightforward as we go so far. Vizehu Shomer Razal, and this is what Razal say. This is in Pirkei Avos. Have a son of Larayas, Ba'al Tehireish L'Shualim. Be a tail of lions, and don't be a head of fox. So even though a reish is higher, you think a reish is higher than a zanav. Better to be a head than a tail. But to be a tail of a lion, which is a higher level, than be a head of a lower level, as he's going to explain. Reish l'sha'alim hika shamalchus. That's referring to the head of the fox, referring to malchus. Malchus he sheirish shemakul elam habriya. Malchus is the root and source of the world of Biy'a, so it's a reish. The bechinas malchus nasa kesel leBriy'a. The malchus, where they add in the footnote, malchus of Atzilus, becomes keser, the crown of Biy'a. So that's the reish. The son of Larai is the tail of the lion. What is that? The lions refers to who kamesha malchus hi ba'Atzilus. Malchus Atzilus, Harihu, os b'mayla madrei gavoya v'nayla yeser. Malchus Atzilus, which is like a tail, the lowest end of Atzilus, Sefer the Kol Dargin, is in a higher qualitative level, mayla madrei gavoya, higher quality level, higher v'nayla and superior, much more superior than the rei as Malchus goes down into Biy'a. Why is this the case? Lefi shehi ba'Atzilus, because there it's Malchus and Atzilus. So yes, the shlichus of Malchus is to go down into Biy'a and to Biy'a, and to energize and vivify and transmit alakus, godliness there. But when Malchus was in the presence of its teacher in Atzilus, even though then it's Mekabel, it's the lowest level, it's a higher level than when Malchus goes out downward, so to speak. The fishi ba'Atzilus. Hagam shi b'madrega, hagam shi madrega achreina shabatzilus. Even though it's the lowest level in Atzilus. And the Rebbe Rashab is going to give an example. Like for example, Ziva Shemesh, the light of the sun. Af shehu meir la'aretz. Even though we say that the sun radiates and illuminates the earth, and to those that dwell on it, those that dwell on earth, in other words, the world, everything that all creatures of this world, Afa Pikein, nevertheless, Be'esha Ziv Kolu Bashemesh, when that very light is encompassed within the sun. So we know there's a light that's coming out of the sun that's radiating and illuminating the earth and all that dwell there. But there's also the light of the sun in its source. So he says, Hu Yeser Naila. The light inside the sun is far greater than the light that comes down to earth to illuminate this world. Like he says in Sefer Shalbeinim, that Shari Yechad V'Amuna, chapter 3, where he says this. Now, just for the record, even though Sefer Shalbeni technically is only the first section of Tanya, the first 23 chapters, the first 53 chapters, the 53 chapters of Lukut Amorim, but the Rebbe explains in another place that sometimes the whole Tanya, all 5 parts of it, including Shari Yechad V'Amuna and Ageres HaTshuva and Ageres HaKedesh and Kuntur Sachin, are called generally Sefer Shalbeni, in case you're wondering. So, what do we see from this? That even though the real benefit of the sun is when it illuminates and radiates and warms and illuminates this world, but the light in the sun is far greater, more powerful, more intense even though there it's only the outer dimension of the sun. Whereas the sun, as its Mashpia, seems to be much more significant. Yeah, but the light inside the sun, like Malchus, who Kamoy Kain, next page, 1445. And what's the mashal? Who Kamoy Kain, same, similarly. Kisha Malchus hi Atzilus. Well, Malchus is an Atzilus sheklula umiyechedes bebchinas shemesh havaya. That's the explanation of the mashal. When it's encompassed and united with the shemesh havaya, Mogan Elikima's expression. So havaya is compared to shemesh. Now he's calling that the level of Atzilus. So in the mashal is the light within the sun. In the nimshal, in the moral, it's Malchus within Atzilus. It's a higher level than when Malchus comes down and shines into Biy'a. Okay, relatively speaking, the Rebbe Rashab is elaborating. You see here much more elaboration than some of the pieces we learned earlier. So there's no way to really predict this. Some sections of the Rebbe Rashab is more dense, and some he elaborates. Could be because it's a topic he hasn't spoken about before. It's hard to explain why. But he is definitely elaborating with a lot of examples so far. Okay. Again, remember the flow. This is all coming to explain Matat, the Malach. That's the interface between the intermediary between Ahava and Yira of Malachim, of the Ahava and Yira of Neshamas into as they are below. Is Mana Golus. So far, Yeshua has two levels. Nar, and the first level is higher than the second, like Malchus. The first level in Atzilus is higher than Malchus that comes into Biy'a. An example of the sun, the light within the sun is higher than the light outside the sun, as it's Mashpia to earth. Okay. Just summing up what we learned. Now comes a parenthesis. Now, how long is this parenthesis? Okay, it's 4 lines. 5 lines. So let's learn the parentheses. Any questions so far? So he says like this in the parentheses, V'hainu, Rebbe Rashab is adding, V'hainu, and this means, Gam kesham malchus hi b'mabchinas partzu b'fnei atzmei b'atzilus. Also malchus, the way it's a separate structure. Partzu means face, but partzu is a structure of its own entity. Mekabelis mizah, and it receives from zah. Okay. Let me re-sing that melody. I didn't say it in the right tone. Saying what we just said is referring to not just Malchus as it's encompassed in Atzilus, meaning in the higher levels. We're talking already Malchus also, not in Biy'a, but Malchus has become a sphere. So in Atzilus itself, there's 2 levels of Malchus. There's Malchus that has not yet even become Malchus. It's still encompassed within Zah. And then there's Malchus becomes a sphere b'fnei atzma, a separate sphere, a separate parsuf, and it's receiving from Zah. So even that level is also higher than Malchus as it comes into Biy'a. And the Rebbe Rashab is qualifying this because it's important. Because usually Shemesh Havaya is Zah. So if you're saying the light inside the sun in the example, then that would be Malchus as it's inside of Zah, not Malchus as outside of Zah. We're not talking about Malchus coming into Biy'a, even in Atzilus itself. That's what the Rebbe Rashab is qualifying in the parentheses. So he's saying what I just said is referring to even Malchus, Gamke Malchus, including Malchus, as it's a separate entity in Atzilus and receiving from Zah. Va'amoshel deziva shemesh b'shemesh. And the example of the light of the sun within the sun, l'chayre yitzdak, l'chayre seemingly would apply. Yitzdak means more appropriate, fitting. It's more fitting. Al b'chinas hamalchus k'moishi klula b'zah. That would seem to make more sense. That light inside the sun, meaning malchus as is inside of the sun of Zah. V'hu anikra kalas meisha, or kalas, yeah. That's called kalas mesha. I think he means here kalas from the word bride, like. Like it says elsewhere, v'nizboyer le'il. And was explained earlier. That I don't remember where that was explained.
Elois Moshe. Vahi b'yoim klois Moshe.
I know, but when Moshe was up on the mountain, right?
No, when he finished to build the Mishkan, I think.
Oh, it's to finish the Mishkan or to finish the time? Yeah, but I think Kalois, is the Mefarshim there explained that Kalois comes from the word kalas?
I think that Rashi, not kalus, like a kala.
Kala. I mean, not kalus as in, I meant like a kala, like the kala of Moshe, yeah.
I think it said, Vahi b'yoim klois Moshe lehokim es Mishkan.
So Rashi says Kalois from the word kala. Kala.
Didn't roll like a kala, I think.
Yeah. I agree. I was referring to the Rashi, yeah. Okay, so that's the level where Malchus is encompassed within Zah. I would have to look that up. Maybe if you do a search, you may find it. I don't remember where that was. So there, the muscle for sure fits. That Malchus, as it's encompassed in Zah, is higher than Malchus as a separate entity. But here in this Maimer, in Ayin Beis, he wants to explain how Malchus, even as a separate entity in Atzilus, is higher than Malchus as it comes into Biy'a. And this is like it says in Teira Eir in Neyach, the Pasha Neyach. There's also a Mayim Rabbim entailed this in the Teira Eir. So he says, in the explanation of the Mayim Rabbim Pasha Neyach, Be'inyan sheyidubar ba. So I have to look it up. There he talks about this. In that Maimer he discusses this idea of Malchus encompassed inside of Zah. I'm not sure what means Be'inyan sheyidubar, but I have to look there.
Maybe what it said in Shir Hashirim about the Jewish people, Be'yoim sheyidubar bo.
Probably. Yeah, I'll look it up. I'll report back. But the goal here is to save him further than that. However, Gam Kishi b'bchinas Mekabel mizah, even as Malchus is a separate entity in Atzilus and receiving from Zah, not encompassed, how do you miyuched as b'Zah? It's united with Zah. And as such, it's higher, it's still Mekabel. So in other words, in Malchus, there's two levels. Malchus within Zah, Malchus outside of Zah, but still in Atzilus. And that's higher. That's also higher. Mashenkin, end of the parentheses. Now it goes back. Mashenkin, kishenasis kesed leBiy'a. By contrast, when Malchus becomes the crown of Biy'a, which is Hari Nikra Reisha Biy'a, then it's called the Reish, like Reish L'Shualim. It's now a head. Commission Kosav Be'etz Chaim, like he says, like he says in Eitz Chaim. So what do we derive from this? That even though a head would seem higher than a tail, the Mashpia of a lower level is a high level, but being Mekabel from a higher level is a higher level. That's essentially what he's saying. So now we can go back to Yeshua. Remember, we said Yeshua has two levels. When he was lo yomish metechael, completely dedicated, a student, no entity on his own, but completely connected and devoted to Moshe. And then Yeshua, as he becomes achrei Moshe, after Moshe's passing, he becomes a leader with Moshe's smicha. So kamay kenu be Yeshua, kishay Mekabel Moshe, when he received from Moshe, and Moshe was what? The level of Shemesh, bechinas Shemesh. Hashem, K'pnei Moshe, K'pnei Chama. It says the face of Moshe is like the face of the sun. So when he was receiving from Moshe, it was the level of Shemesh Hashem, like the level that he just described. Yeshua being like Malchus, receiving from Zah, from the Shemesh, from Moshe. He was in the higher level, from the way he was afterwards on his own. Hagam shoyu b'bchinas Mashpia. Even though when he became on his own, a leader of his own. He's in a level state of Mashpia. So the Mekabel is higher than Mashpia because it's a Mekabel from a higher level, and Mashpia is a lower level. And now he's going to go back to Matat. The same is with Matat. The whole thing began, if you go back, that a Matat, which is called Nar, has two levels. The Chaim benar de Matat yesh beis madregas. And so too with the youngster, the youth of Matat, there's also two levels. These two levels. He's going to explain now. The B'me'era Eir, remember Me'era Eir is from Meir Papirash, a Kabbalistic encyclopedia that goes by letters, entries on each word. So Mareches Mem Eis Nun Ches. Mareches Mem means the section, Mareches is the section, the letter Mem, and letter meaning subsection 58. What does he write? Kosav, Matat Nikra Yitzira. Matat is called the world of Yitzira. V'gam hamalchus hamislabeshes b'Biy'a nikra kach. We also find that malchus, as it manifests in Biy'a, it's also called this way, Matat. Atkan l'shene. So he's actually quoting the exact citation from Ma'ir. So what do we see from this? Bahainu. What do we see from this? The Matat hu levush lebchinas malchus. Matat is a garment to the level of malchus. Vayodah. Through this Matat, this through levush, Mashpia hamalchus b'Biy'a. So he's adding that Matat is not just the level of malchus, it's like a garment for malchus, that through it, malchus is Mashpia in Biy'a. And that's why he says malchus, hamislabeshes b'Biy'a nikra kach. Now you could ask, how does he know that malchus is not, Matat is not actually the level of malchus itself? So if you look in the Maimer of the Maimer Kinal, that he brought it earlier from Likkutei Torah, he explains that Matat is not exactly malchus, it's a garment to malchus. Just adding that. What was the page that you said? Aleph Shin Samach Tes? You told me before about Matat. I think so, right? No, we talked before about Matat. Yeah. I think
That
he
was
brings
Nar
in
Zaken.
a beer. No, not right. I'm sorry. Yeah, Shin Samach Tes. Not. Yeah, but there he brings. Let me see here.
1428 and 1429 was the other reference.
No, not. I meant 1420, 1469, 1369. Sorry, I'm just looking. He brought the Maimer there, or did he bring it earlier? Matat. Let's see. Al Kapam, the Likkutei Torah, he speaks that it's like the level of Nal. Sandal is another name sometimes given for Matat. Sandal is like a sandal, a garment for Malchus. Because Malchus, remember, needs to manifest in Biy'a, goes to a parsa, a partition, but then Malchus manifests. So Matat is a levush to Malchus in order for Malchus to be Mashpia into Biy'a. That's what he's explaining here based on the Ma'ir. Yeah. Good. So what do we have here? That's the second level of Matat. But he said there's two, like in Malchus and like in Yeshua, and like Malchus. Well, Lepamim, and at times, Eila Ba'Atzilus. And this level of Matat, at times, is not serving the role of, well, I shouldn't say not serving the role. There's another dimension of Matat, when it's Eila, Lepamim, it's Eila and Atzilus. And then Matat is the higher level, Mekabel, not Mashpia. So the same two levels we spoke in Yeshua, and based on the two levels in Malchus, since the Matat is called Nar, so just like the Nar of Yeshua has two levels, the way he's a Nar and Mekabel, and then the way he becomes afterwards a Mashpia, and the higher level is when he's a Mekabel. So Matat also has both levels. The Me'oreh is talking about the lower level. Matat as it Mislabeshes and Biy'a, Malchus coming down. But then Lopomim, Eile B'Atzilus. V'ya Shleimer says the Rebbe Rashab, there's another name for Matat, it's called Chanoich. Chanoich from the Bible, from the Torah, it says that he, like Eliyahu, went up to heaven and he became the angel Matat. Yeshleim b'pnei Matat hu Chanoich l'chei v'yicholte lales la'Atzilus. Because Matat is the level of Chanoich, that's why it has the capacity to go up in Atzilus. Chanoich, like Eliyahu, were from the only people that went up without their bodies being buried, they went up with their body upward. It's a particular higher level of Aliyah, where Allah B'Sara Shemaima with the body. So Chanoich, Matat, therefore he's saying, Yashlemer, how do we know Matat has the ability to go up? Because that's the level of Chanoich. Because it's the level of Chanoich, that's why it has the capacity to also go up into Atzilus. Va'oz, and when it does that, Nikra Nar, that's when it's called Nar. Al derech Nar lo yomish b'teicha, like the Nar of Yeshua that never left, never separated from the oil of Moshe. So then he's in a state of Nar. He's not in the state of Zokin. He's not in the state of Mashpia. He's in the state of Mekabel, receiving, absorbing from his teacher. Mipnei shebatel v'nichlal b'bchinas Atzilus, because he's bottled, he's nullified, or consumed, v'nichlal, or subsumed, v'nichlal, and encompassed in a level of Atzilus, l'kabel b'chinas shefa Atzilus. In that state, he's absorbing and receiving the shefa, the flow of Atzilus.
For what it's worth, the reference to Nalaim is on 1431, the bottom part, in reference to Malchus, if that's what you're looking for.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah, look at the Mayofa Pamayr Ben Alaim. Yeah, right. That's the mimer I was referring to. Yeah, the themes here are all connected to what we've learned earlier. And I'll connect it later. Let's first learn it inside, then we'll go back and make a whole overview connecting everything. But the first step is to be Mekabel before Mashpia. Yeah, first to receive, absorb this all. So what does he say? Okay, so that's level, the higher level. Ayin Beis. And the second level in Matat, in this Nar, Kishebchinas Nar zeh yered lamata b'Biy'a. The second level, and this level of Nar is yered, descends below into Biy'a, v'nifsak memenu eira Atzilus. And then that flow, that till now was absorbing like a channel, a transparent channel of bittul, absorbing the higher energy, now it changes its role, because it now has to be a mashpia, so it has to turn downward instead of upward to receive, to be a keli that receives. Now it's being mashpia, so it's yered in Biy'a v'nifsek memenu eira Atzilus. And that that was flowing to it as a student is now pauses or takes or ceases. Now, this is not to say that Yeshua was not still a student of Moshe. He's obviously, like we said, the smicha of Moshe is always receiving Moshe's energy. But the position, the role he's taking right now is not sitting before his master and learning. He's now in the role of teaching, of transmitting. So he doesn't mean nifsak. The connection is not nifsak. The flow of that the malchus is when it's in a state of chazara, so to speak. When you're listening to your Rebbe, you're not a time when you're speaking that. You're not teaching. You're in a state of absorption. Then comes the state when you go downward, and that's what he means, nifsik eira Atzilus. Shouldn't be misunderstood, nifsik in a negative way, meaning that he's now, as if he completely severed his connection. Connection is there, but the role is now one of not being a channeler of that energy, but rather a Mashpia. The truth is, we all know that Malchus is Mashpia and Biy'a is Mashpia, what it received in Atzilus. But it's still two different roles, because if you're sitting in front of your teacher, you're not in a position to be able to teach at that time. And therefore it's two different levels in that sense. Just to explain what he means by that. Okay. Oh, now he brings the Zokan and the, okay. I think I'll stop here, even though it's middle of the topic of Matat. And again, let's keep in mind where he's going with all of this is to explain how the Malach, Hini anechi shelech Malach, shelech Malach, is Matat, is Mamutza in time of Golus, in order for neshamas to receive their Ahava and Yira through this level. So he's going to explain this now all. And then, of course, we're going to go back how neshamas are higher. And that's why when Golus will be over, we'll be able to have the direct link without intermediaries and their support. Okay, but I think I'll stop here. This is a good place to stop by the Paradis. I'm going to continue discussing this. Okay, we'll do that tomorrow. So I'm stopping here, close to the middle of page 1445. Please, any questions?
I was a little late to the class, so forgive me if you gave an introduction to this, but if I know we're also another caveat. I know we're in the middle of learning this, but my question is, what's the inyan of the neshamas needing to receive Ahava and Yira from the Malachim Lamaila? Because that sounds like Lamaila Lamata, whereas you think Ahava and Yira, the neshama, would be like Ratzo, be like Lamata Lamaila. So like the neshama should themselves want to be reuniting with their source. They should have a natural inclination to love and fear their source, the Eberster, the Makor. But whereas this is suggesting that the neshamas, they're so low, so far down that they somehow become slightly disconnected. They forget the full intensity of the makor, so they need help. That's what he's saying here. But I would have thought the neshamas would have intrinsically have Ahava and Yira, and that basically you just got to get the goof out of the way, the kleep out of the way, and the Ahava and Yira would sort of be inherent and intrinsic to the neshama. So I guess I don't understand why the neshamas need this siyua, this help from Malachim. Anyways, with respect to the issue of Ahava and Yira, I understand other things, the compartmentalization, delivery of divine energy in other respects, but the question of Ahava and Yira, it seems like it should be innate inside the neshama.
Not everything is innate means you can access it. That's because it's innate. A lot of people have innate things and they can't access it. Number one, like you said, because the animal soul and the body have it trapped, like you said, malemes and masteres. Secondly, we learned earlier at length, I think you should go back from the beginning when he explained why you need angels and not, why can't neshamas, the Rebbe Rashab himself asked this question a few times. Why, if neshamas are rooted higher, what do we need the angels for Ahava and Yira? We're not just talking about affecting the animal soul. Why do the neshamas need it? So he made it clear, because there's a whole discussion how neshamas are not, when they come below, they're not the way they are above. They have innate, like we all have innate stuff, but you need siyur. The eye, for example, in the soul can see even in the dark. But when the eye comes into, the vision comes into the physical eye, if you don't have an outside light, you're going to be in the dark. And you say, 1 second, doesn't the eye have the power to see innately? It has the power to see, but it's in a world where there's Eris and Kalim, which is a central theme to this whole discussion. The shamas don't come down here just passing through. They manifest in a body. Like I said, you don't need much proof. We all are born and we all have neshamas, chelik elikam mal mamish, and look how difficult it is. And the difficulty is, yes, due to the body and the animal soul, but it's also due to the fact that the neshama is trapped, if you want, in Golus in this world. In addition, of course, he's talking about Golus now as general Golus. But the point is, that's exactly the theme that you got to go back to, in my opinion, read from the beginning of this whole discussion, because this is the central theme. That's what he's been talking about for the last 15 pages, why you need Malachim. In addition, he said more. I'm summing up now all the pages, but he also spoke about how Elikus, even in the neshama, still the neshama coming below, the Elikus is Ein Sof. And we human beings on earth are not Ein Sof. That's why you need the malachim to be like the digestive system. Why do you need a digestive system? Why can't we just put food in our mouth and let it turn into blood? Same idea. So even though everything is coming down from the source and the neshamas receive because they're naturally connected, but it's going through a process. The whole Seder Shtalshus, that's the process. Malachim are that process. So there's a lot of things that malachim are accomplishing. Two things we learned yesterday, which is number one, it affects the animal soul, that's sizable. But also for the divine soul to access the Ahava and Yira is coming through these channels that help. And like I said, I think the more inspiration, the more power we can have, the better it is, even more than malachim. So I would ask the question the other way around. Even with the malachim, look how difficult it is.
Yes. Wow. Thank you. That was a great, heck of an answer. Thank you.
Okay.
The chacham is this the higher levels of Ava, or the elementary, which is chacham, that we can access through chacham and bina and logic. Is that also part of what the malachim do?
I'm not sure what you mean. What are you referring to?
The level, different types of Ava. The Ava that we learned.
Here he's speaking in general. Or look,
even the lowest levels of Ava.
May I ask? Okay. All levels of Ahava and Yira, I would say. I'll ask a personal question. Does everyone find it easy to find Ahava and Yira Hashem 24/7? Anyone here in this?
No, I'll speak first. You're right. It's not so simple. You get stuck in all the mundane matters of the world, and you get distracted. I mean, this doesn't mean you lose it, but yes.
No, so even if we innately have the neshama has it. So no, I'm also responding to Tzvi. No matter what level of Ahava and Yira, even when we work hard and we contemplate, and let's say a person is completely focused, like he says in Tanya chapter 12, where you're focused and your mind, your heart, everything is connected to godliness. Even then, the animal soul has not disappeared. It's just been like put aside and has receded, as asleep, like he says later in chapter 13. So we can get all the help we can get, we want, because the neshama it's very challenged in this world. Why do you think a neshama doesn't want to come to this world? But we have plenty of resources. Mashpia Russia. We're taught the entire Torah. It's not that we don't have resources, but it's still a great challenge. But I think to be practical about it. It's not like I said, it's not mechanics. Yeah, the car, the machine we are has divine. We're chelik elokam mamish. But look how difficult it is, because the neshama is, as I said, is not just it's not just passing through. The neshama manifests in existence. It manifests. The neshama and the guf are bound together. Neshama can't just do whatever it likes. I wish it was the case, but that's not the case. So, and don't think of angels as type of like white-winged elves flying around. We're talking about divine energies that God embedded into the cosmic order that play a critical role in the way things are processed, delivered, the way they help stimulate. I mean, when we daven Yotzer, I mentioned yesterday, try davening, say the Yotzer with Kavanah. Look at those paragraphs where it talks about the Melach. It's like I said yesterday, listening to the cosmic symphony of angels singing. It has to inspire you. It's like looking at someone who's really through and through devoted through and through to godliness. And when you experience that, it can melt your heart. It can help you awaken the Ahava and Yira that's innate in you. Not only innate, even higher than the Malachim. Just because the Malachim are helping us, it doesn't say they're higher than us. It's like having a teacher who educates and trains you and brings out innate skills, let's say musical skills, and you far surpass the teacher. But you're still going to thank your teacher because he's the one that helped you access it, build the confidence, and help you build the methodology to access. So you may be a musical genius, much greater than the music teacher you had. But the music teacher deserves a lot because they helped you access it and train yourself, discipline yourself, everything you need to get to access it. So there are a lot of examples, but Try to think of it practically almost. I always say talking the Avodah level is much easier to understand than trying to understand it scientifically or the mechanics of it. That makes sense?
Very much.
I'm trying to get my head around the point that Yeshua and as his Mekabel from Moshe is called a Na'ar, and then he becomes a Zakan when he's Mashpia. But it turns out that as a Na'ar is higher level than the Zakin. So normally we're thinking the Zakin is a superior Madrega. Here it says the Na'ar is a lot higher. So it's an unusual use of the flipping the term, so to speak, that we're normally used to. And B, the Rebbe always taught us to go out there and be a leader. The famous statement by Rabbi Sachs that many rabbis that he met were interested in producing followers, whereas the Rebbe was interested in producing leaders, and Mashpia. So if we're really on a higher level, when we're Mekabel from Moshe Shadoro, in our generation, wouldn't it be that we'd be wouldn't it be preferable to stay as a Na'ar?
Can you come up with an answer to this question?
I mean, I guess it'd be sacrificing Mesiras Nefesh, to sacrifice our level for the sake of the Kahal.
Okay, so you're asking the exact question the Rebbe Rashab asked, and he explained it. You're not asking a side question. This is exactly what the Rebbe Rashab tackles here. He says, even though it would appear that now he's a Mashpia of his own, and that would be a quality that's higher than when he's a Mekabel. So he says, to understand this, he goes to Malchus. Is Malchus of Atzilus higher than Malchus as it comes in Biy'a? That you understand, right?
Yes.
Or you don't understand that either?
No, I understand that. Location.
Well, it's location. It's also a state of Lakus, where he's. So we're not talking about the shlichus of a person. We're not talking about the purpose. Obviously, the goal is that the neshama should come down from the highest levels down to tachtenim, or else we wouldn't be sent down here altogether. You could ask, why does Malchus go to Biy'a if it's much higher in Atzilus? Because that's the shlichus. Like the Meraglim didn't want to go into Eretz Yisrael because they felt it's higher and more spiritual to be in Gan Eden in the wilderness.
Right.
So more comfortable there and higher spirituality. You're asking the kavanah is to go down to a lower place. But there is something to be said about that. If you're talking about the pure firepower of Atzilus is higher than the firepower of Biy'a, even though the kavanah is to come down to Biy'a. And in the kavanah lies something that even Atzilus doesn't have. But that's another discussion. I mean, this is so central to something we keep talking about. In Giluyim, Atzilus is higher than Biy'a. In Atzmus and Etzem, the kavanah is to come to Tachtenim, but they're called Tachtenim. Even when Tachtenim have the kavanah as Atzmus higher than Atzilus, like he says in Tanya, Atzilus is still a higher level. I mean, it's like saying, let's ask this question. Is the Rebbe higher than his shluchim or not? Why? The shluchim are coming down and fulfilling the kavanah. The Rebbe is staying in his own place. So you say, well, it depends what you're talking about. Anyway, that's the back and forth that needs to be understood.
Got it.
And it is a constant dance, to be honest, because on one hand, you have to come down. On the second hand, you have to connect to above. It's a constant ratzei v'shuv of a flow. I've shared the story with the shliach years ago. The shliach, he couldn't tear himself away from the Rebbe. The Rebbe sent him to some other city. So every few weeks, he'd show up in New York for Farbrengen. So Rabbi Chadakov, the Rebbe's chief of staff, called him in and said, the Rebbe sees him by Farbrengens. Why is he not in the shlichus? So he says, I need to come back to get my energy, to replenish, to rejuvenate myself, recharge my batteries. So the Rebbe said to him, I sent you there. You'll get the batteries there. That's where I sent you on your shlichus. I'm sending you koiches there. Okay. So he understood. So he didn't come back for a while, a long time. I don't know how long. One day, Rabbi Chadav calls him and says, the Rebbe wants to know why we never see you by Farbrengen. So he says, what do you mean? Didn't you call me and tell me that I have a shlichus? He says, yeah, you need to be there, but you need to want to be here. you have to find a way to balance the two. You understand?
Thanks.
That's right. You know, the phrase Talmud Chacham could mean a Chacham of the Talmud, but it's really a Talmud of a Chacham, and that's a nar. That's what we call a learned person, Talmud Chacham.
Correct. And I'll say something more. At the end, when we finish the whole subject, you're going to see it's ultimately going to have both qualities. You want to have, remember we learned about the quality of Erein Sof and the quality of the Yesh. You want to have both qualities, where the Guf and the Neshama both feed each other. The Neshama feeds Gilui, the Giluyim of Elikus, and the Guf feeds the Etzem, that's higher than Gilui, like we learned in the previous page, actually. That we need both. So at the end of the day, you want to have the full power and intensity of Atzilus as Malchus receives from Atzilus, and that itself should be transmitted to Biy'a. But in first stage, in other words, when the Mashpia, when the Mekabel becomes a Mashpia, so he's Mashpia, so yes, he's Mashpia a lower level than what he received in Atzilus. But the ultimate goal is that he should be Mashpia, everything in Biy'a, what he received in Atzilus, where then there becomes a fusion between both qualities, the Giluyim of Atzilus and the Kavana of Atzmus in the Yesh. So if you really want the full picture, it's going to end up being both qualities, but you can't jump there. Like you can't, first you have to teach the student on his level, and then 40 years later, he starts arriving at understanding Daita de Rabbe and even beyond. It's a very important point as well that you have to keep in mind. Okay?
It's like bringing Minosecha Chutza, the Mayon itself, bringing it Chutza rather than the waters from the Mayon, but the Mayon itself.
That's a nice metaphor, Eliezer.
Yeah. And that's why it goes back and forth and back and forth. You know, the neshama on its own is Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. It's like a flame that's drawn naturally to transcendence. The body is not a transcendent entity. The body is a we call it a lethargic couch potato. However, within it lies tremendous potency from the divine Kavana Atzmos. So the neshama has to teach the guf how to fly, how to soar, how to move. And the guf teaches the neshama how to connect to something that's beyond beyond gili. So each teaches something. It's like Mesiras Nefesh, the sacrifice teaches the neshama to bring out love, even more than the love, the innate love that the neshama has. That's what the animal soul does for the soul, what the animal soul does for the divine soul. And the divine soul, what it does for the animal soul is it inspires it. It gives it a taste of Elikus in a very revealed way. And you need constantly both, Gili and Etzem. Remember, it's not just the illiterate pauper touches the Etzem. You also need the scholar and the Talmid Chacham. Not just Simchas Torah we dance with the Etzem, we also need throughout the year to learn, to internalize, to integrate. So I think when in many of the questions, keep in mind, it depends which one you're talking about. Sometimes we're talking about the mile of Giluyim, then Atzilus is higher than Biy'a. Talk the mile of the Yesh, or so to speak, the mile of Tachtenim and the Kavana, then the lowers are really, not that they're higher, they have more higher Kavana. To put it in different words, you know, there's the Machlekes, there's a disagreement, Shammai and Hillel. Is it more pleasant to be born or not to be born? Right? Nuach la'adam shenivra or shalei nivra. And interestingly, usually the halacha is like Hillel. In this case, the halacha is like Shammai, who says it's more pleasant not to be born. Why? Because when you look at the world and life, the dangers, health, the risks are very high. It's not an easy life. Yes, there's much beauty, but pleasant, it's much more pleasant to be in Gan Eden. You don't have any issues of health, parnasa, children, agmas nefesh. There's no anxiety, nothing. It's beautiful. You're constantly in a heavenly spiritual place. So Shammai says it's Nuach l'Adam Shaleniv. So as the Alter Rebbe, so if that's the case, so why are we born? The halach is like Shammai. And he answers, Nuach l'Adam. It's more pleasant not to be born than to be born. But meaningful, the kavanah, it's much more meaningful to be born than not to be born, because here we fulfill the kavanah of the Eibush. So we say, Yofa Shah Achaz B'tshuva Maisim Tevim Elam Hazam Kol Chai Elam Haba, that 1 hour of tshuva Maisim Tevim in the struggle in this world is more powerful than the whole world to come. But at the same time, the Mishnah also says, Yofa Shah Achaz Shal Keiras Ruach, 1 hour of pleasure in Elam Haba is worth more than all the pleasures in this world. So how do you reconcile the two? It depends what you're talking about. If you're talking about pleasure and pleasantness, it's more pleasant than Elam Haba. Of course, the weather is always beautiful. There's no challenges. If you're talking about more meaningful, what Atzilus wants, Nachas Ruach Beira, what the Eibishter has pleasure from, not just what we have pleasure from. It's far more in this world. And it's a constant, you want both at the end of the day. You want to have both the pleasures of Elam Haba plus the Kavanah and of Atzilus in this world. And that's ultimately what Mashiach and Geula is. I mentioned a number of times the Sikha Vayigash in volume 5 of Likutei Sichos. Vayigash, the second Sikha, the very fundamental Sikha on this topic that I just mentioned. Okay, let's, so we're stopping here. We in the middle of page 1445.